We're going to be in Nehemiah chapter 1 today, and because I have lots of family here, I decided I need to come up with a few points so that I need to do a good job. Usually I just kind of mail it in, but I've got to be careful. I don't want to get excommunicated from the family. And I can remember going to seminary, and they would kind of teach you, just different ideas on preaching, right? And there's different styles of preaching. Obviously, there's different ways to do it. I know in the Baptist life, it's kind of the 3 points in a poem, right? Or a story, right? So you've got to have your 3 points, right? And some, I'm actually impressed that I've known people who will have 3 points, and they'll always all start with the same letter, right? I'm like, dude, that's impressive. Like, how long did it take to come up with those things? So I am going to try to have a few points here, as because I was reading Nehemiah chapter 1, and it's kind of the introduction, and there's actually quite a few big principle ideas presented in Nehemiah chapter 1, and it's, as we talk about a lot, and I think it's just very important. Scripture speaks to us in different ways, right? And it speaks to us very powerfully. It talks on a societal level, but then also on an individual level, right? And I think we need to recognize that. And I actually I love the book of Nehemiah, and I think we're going to be able to apply quite a bit to current circumstances in society, but you can also apply these basic biblical truths to your life as well. So we're going to read Nehemiah chapter 1. And remember, we've talked about Ezra. So the exile, the people have been taken into exile. They're now under Persian rule. They've started going back, some of them. They've rebuilt the temple for the most part. So that's happening. But the city is still kind of in shambles. The wall is not formed, which that was not only a literal defense against enemies. It was kind of symbolic that their structure just wasn't in place. They were just kind of going through the motions, and there was still a lot of problems back in Jerusalem. So Nehemiah, he is one that was taken from Jerusalem. He is in exile. So he is in Persia. And that's where we start in Nehemiah chapter 1. We're going to go to verse 1 of chapter 2. The words of Nehemiah, the son of Hakaliah. Now it happened in the month of Chislev in the 20th year, as I was in Susa, the citadel, that Hanani, one of my brothers, came with certain men from Judah. And I asked them concerning the Jews who escaped, who had survived the exile, and concerning Jerusalem. And they said to me, the remnant there is in the province who had survived the exile is in great trouble and shame. The wall of Jerusalem is broken down, and its gates are destroyed by fire. As soon as I heard these words, I sat down and wept and mourned for days. I continued fasting and praying before the God of heaven. And I said, O Lord, God of heaven, the great and awesome God who keeps covenant and steadfast love with those who love him and keep his commandments, let your ear be attentive and your eyes open to hear the prayer of your servant that I now pray before you day and night for the people of Israel, your servants, confessing the sins of the people of Israel, which we have sinned against you. Even I and my father's house have sinned. We have acted very corruptly against you and have not kept the commandments, the statutes, and the rules that you commanded your servant Moses. Remember the word that you commanded your servant Moses, saying, if you are unfaithful, I will scatter you among the peoples. But if you return to me and keep my commandments and do them, though your outcasts are in the uttermost parts of heaven, from there I will gather them and bring them to the place that I have chosen to make my name dwell there. They are your servants and your people, whom you have redeemed by your great power and your strong hand. O Lord, let your ear be attentive to the prayer of your servant and to the prayer of your servants who delight to fear your name, and give success to your servant today, and grant him mercy in the sight of this man. Now, I was a cupbearer to the king, in the month of Nisan, and in the 20th year of King Artaxerxes, when wine was before him, I took up the wine, gave it to the king. Now I had not been sad in his presence. All right, we're going to stop there. It's kind of a cliffhanger. But I wanted to stop there. I wanted to get to that point because I want us to understand a little bit about who this guy is, Nehemiah. And I love how at the end here, Nehemiah says, I'm a cupbearer to the king. Now, what is he really saying there? He's a slave to the king of Persia. Do you think he worked really hard to put together a resume and went before the king and said, King, I really want to be your cupbearer. And, there's all these other applicants, but I'm the best. I went to school for this, to be the cupbearer. No, Nehemiah was told, you're going to be a cupbearer. I don't fully know exactly all that the cupbearer does, but I'm assuming you just make sure his cup is filled with wine. That's, and maybe you get the high honor of testing to make sure it's not poisoned. That's a good one, right? I wonder what life insurance is for that person, right? But here's the Nehemiah. That's the position that he's in. He's a cupbearer for the king, and then the next line that I think is so important. So now he's going to go before the king, which he would be before the king on a regular basis. Remember, Nehemiah has been taken from his homeland into a foreign place. His homeland is in disarray, right? Due in part to these foreign adversaries. Yeah, it wasn't Persia who actually did the displacing, and Persia has let people go back, but then they kind of stopped the building, and they're in charge. So it's partly their fault that Nehemiah is here being forced to be the cupbearer of the king. And it says specifically that he's going about his duties, and the king notices something different. What was that? It was that Nehemiah was sad, and he had never been sad in the presence of the king before. This shouldn't compute. In our 21st century wisdom, does Nehemiah not know that he's the oppressed? This guy's the oppressor. He's the one that is responsible for all of your ills, right? This is what our society today teaches. But Nehemiah was a cupbearer to the king, and he served diligently. He served happy. He served because God told them. Remember we read in Jeremiah 29? Right before that, what did God tell them? He said, go, you're going to be in exile. You need to raise families. You need to be prosperous. You need to help the opposing government be prosperous, because if it goes well for them, it will go well for you. Nehemiah was a godly man. He did not allow those human traits that we all can hold on to. The bitterness of when we're in situations that are not fair. Whenever we're being told, this is what you're going to do. Right? I mean, he is literally enslaved. Right? And he is rather than acting as someone who is oppressed and acting as someone who is victimized, he's taking a totally different perspective. And so to the point that the one day he's a little sad, it didn't say that Nehemiah wasn't doing his job. It didn't say that he was missing the cup with wine. It just said he was down. He was sad. And the king noticed that. That means every other day, the king noticed that Nehemiah was doing his job well and was respectful, and there were no problems. There is a huge lesson in just that simple thought. Our society is going down a really ugly rabbit hole of elevating being a victim. And you can see it. It doesn't matter what group you're part of. You can find a group out there that will tell you that you're a victim. Right? You're a victim because your ancestors were in slavery. Right? Then you can go and say, well, you're a victim because now we've tried to elevate those who have been in slavery, and so now we're discriminating against those who did the slave holding, right? So now I'm a victim on that side. Everyone can be a victim. You can be a victim. You can be a victim. You can be a victim, right? and the scary thing is these are ideologies that are being taught out there, right? We should kind of laugh, but understand you can read syllabuses of some of college courses, and you won't even understand what it's talking about, but it goes deep into viewing the world as oppressor and oppressed. That is a horrible way to look at the world, and it is not biblical. The world is fallen. It's a mess. There are societies that have enslaved people and vice versa throughout all of history, and it's always wrong, and it's always the result of sinfulness. We cannot be defined by the fallen circumstances of our world. If you are defined by that, you will always feel like you are defeated. It doesn't matter how much you get, how much society tries to right the wrongs of the past. If that's how you're approaching life, you will always be the victim. Christ came to give us victory. We are not victims. Quit acting like it. Nehemiah had every reason just to go through the motions of his job. But he didn't. He took it seriously. He did it as unto the Lord, even though it was not just, it was not right. And he was a victim of circumstance. But he did not view himself that way, and he did not act that way. This is vital to understand. And I think that leads to God being able to do things in your life that he wouldn't have been beforehand. And we're going to see that with Nehemiah. So that's point one. Understand your circumstances in life are not going to be fair. They're not always going to be right. And you can't control that. So no matter what your circumstances are, start living the way that God has called you to live, in a way that's pointing people to him. Nehemiah was doing that. And all of a sudden, the king recognizes. And I would love to know the full story of Nehemiah's interactions with the king. We're going to see a few of them. But I promise you, he was able to share about his relationship with God. There's no doubt about that. So make sure we don't fall into the trap that we see so often now in our society of this victim mentality. That's the one way to guarantee that you will always stay the victim. But Christ has given us victory. We see that just in those two little lines there in this first chapter of Nehemiah. So the first is we need to embrace our circumstances, no matter what they are, right? And the next thing that I see as we read through this is that Nehemiah is paying attention to the world around him. And he actually is aware of what's going on. And so when he hears his brother comes back and kind of gives him a message, again, remember, they're not able to watch Fox News in the evening and find out, hey, what's going on back in Jerusalem, right? No one's group chatting them. There's no couriers for the most part. This is a difficult time. So Nehemiah would have known that there was a group back there that was doing some rebuilding of the temple and things like that, but he didn't know how things were going. And so when he hears about it, he immediately recognizes the sadness, the danger, that this is not what God desires. Right? When he was willing to look honestly at the circumstances around him and recognize, oh, there's a problem and I need to do something about it. I need to engage in this. I think this is an important point. I think we do live in kind of a time on a societal level where there's so much going on, and we are inundated with news of everything, right? We know too much. Our temptation is to kind of just stick our head in the sand and just kind of find our little narrow lane, and here's what we're going to do. Right? And I'm just going to focus on this. I'm going to focus on my family. I'm going to focus on my job. That's it. Yeah, I know there's some crazy stuff going on out there in society, but it's just too much. I just need to do this. God's called us to do more than that, and it's hard because we have to make a balance. But we need to be aware of what's going on in the society around us. I think one of the reasons we're in the place that we are now is that our churches, especially, have gotten focused so much on just their current circumstances. And hey, we just want to do church. We just want to, share the gospel message by getting people to come in, and we want to attract people to come into the church. And we kind of recognize, yeah, there's a lot of crazy stuff going on out there in the culture, but the church hasn't actively engaged it. There are many of us, I think, and many Christians who have kind of kept their head in the sand as culture has radically changed. I mean, within the last 20 years, our culture is nearly 180 degrees different than what it was. I mean, we are at the point that, and within the last 20 years, we have moved to where those passages in Isaiah and I believe in Jeremiah, where God says, and they will call good evil and evil good. We have transitioned into that place that on policy levels, right? Where there are half the country believes one institution or one policy or one law, half believe it's good and half believe that it's evil. And that is not where we were 20 years ago. We've been moving that direction for a lot longer, but society has completely changed. And it is a challenge, and the church is playing catch up now. But it is important that we recognize that. Nehemiah, when he hears what's happening, he recognizes how dangerous that is, and that is not what God desired for that society. And so he begins to figure out how he's going to engage, how he's going to make a difference. It's very important that we do that on a societal level. But I would also encourage you in your own personal life. Sometimes we stick our head in the sand when our own personal life is starting to kind of spin out of control. We start making excuses, right? And maybe it's you as an individual, that you are getting caught in behaviors and things that you know that you shouldn't, and it's leading you further away from God, and things that all of a sudden it starts impacting your family, it starts impacting your work. It becomes very easy for us to just kind of, I'm not going to pay attention to that. I'm just going to plow through, right? No, when things start going off kilter, whenever you start to step back and look and you recognize, ooh, the wall is starting to crack. Maybe the one of the gates is on fire right now. Recognize that. Don't pretend it doesn't exist. So often we do that, and we do live in a society where you can do that, right? You can just go home and watch Netflix and just tune out everything, right? And sometimes that's how we cope. That is so not healthy. Listen, all of us are under attack. And so your wall around you is going to be attacked, and there's times that it's going to start crumbling. When it does, that just means you're human. Don't ignore it. No, start rebuilding the wall. Right? And I think that's very important for us because a lot of times we just see the comfortable thing. We don't want to engage the hard thing that may need to change in our life. Right? We'd much rather just take it easy. Nehemiah, he's about to do something that's going to change his life and make his life much more difficult. Why? Because he recognizes that the wall is crumbling and that God wants more than that, and that Nehemiah was going to be in a position to do it. Well, guess what? God is calling you to start rebuilding the walls in your life too when they start crumbling. Don't let it get to the point where the walls have fallen. The great thing is even if they have fallen, God can help you rebuild them. But I think God would rather us replace one brick than have to rebuild the whole thing. Right? So be alert to what's going on around you, whether it's society or whether it's in your own personal life. So then, here we have Nehemiah in his circumstance. He hears what's going on. And what is his first response? His first response is to run to the Lord. And in a very personal and passionate way, he begins repenting. He begins acknowledging all of the things that have led to the fall of the wall. Now, did Nehemiah personally have really anything to do with the fall of the wall of Jerusalem? No. But he was looking at it. He was part of this group of people that were called by God. And he could see the direction that they had gone as a society. And so he began repenting and naming those sins of how, as a society, we have turned our back on you. Right? He's acknowledging that, and he's including himself in that. And then he also gets very personal. He says, and me and my father's household, we too have not lived up to what you have called us to do. That's true for all of us. We need to recognize when your wall is starting to crumble, the first thing that you need to do is you need to turn to the Lord and say, what is it that I am doing? What, right? Because where am I faltering? Am I out of your will? Am I going my own way? Am I worshiping other gods? Right? Have I made other things more important than you? Right? Be willing to do that, because without it, you'll never be able to start rebuilding the wall. And so Nehemiah hits the floor, and he begins to fast and to pray and to recognize, I understand why we got into the circumstance that we're in. And he understood that it was because of a lack of faith in God. And he knew that in order to remedy that, he was going to have to lean in to rely on the God who loved them. And one of the things that is said, and it's mentioned a few times in the Old Testament, in the New Testament, we talk a lot about the Greek word agape for love, kind of unconditional love. The Hebrew word that is used, and it's in verse 5, it says, Nehemiah says, O Lord God of heaven, the great and awesome God who keeps covenant and steadfast love with those who love him and keep his commandments. That term, that covenant and steadfast love, all of that is one word. It's hesed. And it's a covenantal love. It's a love that God has with us. It's a covenant that he has made to us, right? And so he is the one that's responsible for keeping that hesed love. So we even have that hesed love even when we have broken the law, right? Broken his law and have gone our own way. And so that leads to consequences, but it doesn't break the love that God has for us. And so Nehemiah is calling out to God, and he's saying, God, I know you are a God of covenant, that you are a God who has a steadfast love for us. And I am calling on you. I am repenting. I am turning my life over to you. I am recognizing what our society, what our people have done. We have not held up our end of the deal. But God, you promised to love us anyway. And I'm calling on you. I'm begging you to do that. Right? He is calling on God to hold fast to his hesed, covenantal, steadfast love. Never forget that. See, too often we know that human love can be very deep, but it's nearly always conditional. We know deep down that there are things that can break that relationship. And so often I think we apply that to our relationship with God. Nothing can break the love that God has for you. Now, you can do a lot of things that are going to bring consequences that are going to make your life miserable. That the walls are going to get burned if you keep going that direction. If you don't respond to his love with loving him in return, there's going to be bad consequences, but that does not break the love that God has for you. He is wanting you to turn back to him. And that's what Nehemiah wants to do. He is preparing himself so that he can go and to begin turning the people back towards God. Ezra has already been doing this, right? God is moving in this big picture, right? So there's people already there, but Nehemiah is now feels called. I need to go and to start rebuilding the wall. And he gets close to the end, and I love what it says. It says, "They are your servants whom you have redeemed by your great power and by your strong hand." He's saying, God, you have redeemed us, right? He's asking him that power of redemption that we have. We need it now. We need you to intervene. And he says, O Lord, let your ear be attentive to the prayer of your servant and to the prayer of your servants who delight to fear your name, and give success to your servant today, and grant him mercy in sight of this man. So Nehemiah, now the plan, the wisdom that he's been seeking from the Lord has led to him coming up with this plan that he's now going to go to the king. And so he is very specific and says, okay, Lord, I need your power. I need you to be with me right now as I go and I talk to the king. Right? And when our walls are crumbling, we need to spend time to actually identify what the real problem is. Don't come up. Too often we try to come up with the plan first of how to fix it, but we haven't actually identified what the cause is. Nehemiah took the time. You know what the cause is? Is as a people, we've turned our back on God. We've been idolatrous. This is the consequence. So in order to fix that, there's going to have to be a physical rebuilding of the wall, yes. But people are going to have to get their head on straight and repent and turn to the one who has redeemed them. Right? So you have to know the root cause of the problem before you start the plan. And so Nehemiah spends time doing that. And then at the end, he knows what he's going to ask from the king. And he says, God, I need you to show up. And we'll see that God does. You know, all of us, we live in a crazy time and a crazy society. There's lots of crumbling walls out there. And it's tough. It's tough to know how to raise kids. I mean, none of us in here, if you were born pre-2000, you don't know how to raise kids today. You don't. It's totally different, right? And it's totally challenging. And now, and this is the harsh reality, but But Nehemiah embraced a harsh reality, is that we live in a society that is actively against the things of God. We've always lived in a fallen society where the impacts of sin are evident, where things, are not right. But we are now living in a society, unfortunately, that is actively against the things of God. Spiritual warfare is upon us, whether you like it or not. There's a great line in Braveheart, I believe, where the guy's saying, well, we don't want to go to war. And he says, war is upon you. You better start fighting because it's coming. We are in a spiritual battle, but God has already secured the victory. Right? God has already given us the strength. And I think he's pointing, hey, there's a lot of walls that are crumbling. Start rebuilding them, right? Start with your own relationship with God. Make sure that you are focused on him and that you have not put anything else in front of him in your life. Start there. And then he'll open your eyes to other places that you can go and share that message that rebuilds walls, that message of redemption that the world desperately needs. He will provide opportunities for you. Who knows what wall he's going to call you to go and rebuild, just like he called Nehemiah to go and rebuild. And at some point, Nehemiah quit mourning and fasting and just being in prayer. And he got up and he said, we're going to go make a difference. God's calling me to do this, and now it's time to go. There's times that we can mourn, and I look at society and I mourn. I mourn what we've lost. But you know what? That time is past. Now it's time to bring that message that rebuilds walls, that points people to the one who loves them, the one who offers that steadfast love, the one who has given them redemption through Jesus Christ. That is what we have been called to do. Look for the walls that God is calling you to help rebuild.